What would you do if you had an enemy who frustrates you day and night, someone who makes your life a living hell? Then one day you suddenly get the perfect opportunity to destroy them without any witnesses or obstacles. For most people, the temptation to take revenge would be overwhelming. Yet one of the most remarkable stories in the Bible tells of a man who stood in that exact situation, not once but twice, and chose mercy instead of vengeance. That man was David. This story unfolds in the book of 1 Samuel during a turbulent period in Israel's history. David was serving as a loyal servant in the court of King Saul. After defeating Goliath, David became widely admired by the people of Israel. Songs were sung celebrating his victories, and his reputation grew quickly. But what should have been a source of pride for King Saul instead became the spark for deep jealousy. Saul began to see David as a threat to his throne, and that jealousy slowly turned into a dangerous obsession. Before long, King Saul was determined to eliminate David. David was therefore forced to flee for his life. The young warrior who had once served the king faithfully became a fugitive, hiding in caves and remote wilderness areas. Saul would pursue him relentlessly with thousands of soldiers. From a human perspective, David had every reason to also find ways to destroy the man who was trying to kill him. Yet David saw the situation differently. He knew Saul had been chosen and anointed as king by God, and so he believed it was not his place to take the throne through violence or revenge. The first dramatic moment came in the wilderness near a place called Envied, as recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 24. Saul had taken 3,000 chosen men to hunt down David. During the search, the Bible says that Saul entered a cave to relieve himself, unaware that David and his men were hidden deep inside that very cave. David's men could hardly believe what they were seeing. They whispered excitedly that this was the moment God had delivered Saul into David's hands. In their eyes, the solution was obvious. All David had to do was strike once, and the entire nightmare would be over, and the throne of Israel would be his. But David wasn't of this idea. Instead, David quietly approached Saul in the darkness of the cave as he was relieving himself and silently cut off a corner of the king's robe before slipping back into hiding. What's even more surprising is that this small act troubled David's conscience. He felt guilty for cutting the robe of the Lord's anointed king. When Saul finally left the cave and continued on his way, David stepped out and called after him. Holding the piece of robe in his hand, David showed Saul that he had been close enough to kill him, but had chosen not to because he considered him the Lord's anointed king. King Saul was shaken by David's mercy, and even admitted that David had treated him with righteousness, while he had instead pursued him with evil intentions. Saul even acknowledged that David would one day be king. This incident made King Saul stop pursuing David, but unfortunately, his jealousy returned, and he soon began trying to eliminate David again. The second opportunity came later in the wilderness of Hakilah, recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 26. Once again, King Saul gathered his army to hunt David. One night, David and his friend, Abishai, quietly entered Saul's camp while the entire army slept. David and his friend managed to move through the camp until they reached King Saul himself. Saul was sleeping on the ground with his spear beside his head and a water jug nearby. When Abishai saw this, he whispered to David that this was the moment to end everything. But David once again refused to harm Saul. So instead of killing Saul, David simply took the spear and the water jug lying next to the king's head and left the camp quietly. Then, when David reached a distant hill, he called out to Saul's soldiers and revealed what had happened. Holding up the spear and the jug, he announced to them that he had gotten close enough to kill the king but had chosen mercy instead. Once again, Saul was in shock of David's integrity and mercy. In the end, God removed Saul as king for his constant disobedience and anointed David. The story of David sparing Saul teaches a powerful lesson about restraint and trusting in God as the God of justice. David understood that revenge was not his responsibility, so he chose to trust God to deal with the situation in his own time. In a world that often celebrates retaliation, David proved that sometimes strength does not always involve striking back, but leaving the situation in God's hands. So if you ever face moments where you're tempted to repay hurt with hurt, to answer betrayal with revenge, or to settle scores, remember that God's justice is more powerful than any revenge you can attempt on your own. If you've learned something from this video, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Be blessed.